15 years into my marriage to Zoe, life seemed pretty solid. We had two wonderful preteen daughters who still saw their dad as a hero. I see myself as a classic alpha. I take a stand, don't tolerate nonsense, but treat my wife like the treasure she is. I've always encouraged Zoe to feel empowered, though within limits. Thanks to my father's genes, I'm a big guy. Standing 6 to 6 inches and weighing 265 pounds, I'm all muscle, a presence hard to ignore. But despite my size, I'm a gentle giant. That is, until someone crosses a line. Zoe's seen that side of me only a few times, usually when we're out and some so-called tough guy tries to hit on her. She turns heads with her curves, long legs, slim waist, and striking beauty. I get why men notice her, but it doesn't mean it sits well with me. Jealousy has always been my weak spot. And once that fuse is lit, it's hard to keep it in check. Over the years, I've worked to keep my anger under control, but I still struggle sometimes. Twice over the years, Zoe's seen just how far I'll go to protect her. Both times, a guy decided that he could persuade her to dance, even after she made it clear she was with me. When they ignored her and tried pulling her out of her seat right in front of me, they made a serious error in judgment. I guess they figured that because they looked tough, I'd just sit back and watch as they tried to make a move on my wife. The first incident happened while Zoe and I were out, enjoying a rare night to ourselves, talking about our daughters and just catching up. Out of nowhere, this guy had the audacity to grab her hand and start pulling her toward the dance floor. I didn't waste a second. I was between him and Zoe before he even realized what happened. One swift move and his shoulder was out of commission. I guided him back to his friends, leaving him to deal with the pain while Zoe and I walked out. Disrespect like that doesn't fly with me. And jealousy, well, that's still my weak spot. Lately though, I've been wondering why things reach this point. Zoe knows me better than anyone else. She's aware of my instincts, my loyalty, and my breaking point. But this past year has been different. Little things I hadn't noticed before started raising red flags. It all started when her new boss came into the picture. Zoe's appearance changed, new clothes, a shift in how she presented herself, and she even began initiating intimacy, something out of character for her. Late-night texts and unexpected meetings became the norm. She always had plausible explanations, but my instincts told me something was wrong, no matter how I tried to push the feeling aside. I held off getting updates from the private investigators, hoping my gut was wrong. I didn't want anything to change unless I had undeniable proof. 3 months later, they handed me a folder containing all the evidence I'd feared. I reviewed the photos, audio, and videos, then contacted my attorney, Simon, to prepare the divorce papers for Wednesday afternoon. I had a plan for Thursday night, something special for Zoe and her boss, who thought I was out of town. The shock comes from the fact that Zoe thought she could actually get away with it. She knows me better than anyone, understands my intuition and my zero tolerance for betrayal. She's seen how relentless I can be, like when I took over the company, outmaneuvering the competition to build the large trucking business I now own. My team respects me because I treat them fairly. They'd have my back if it ever came to it. I've given Zoe everything, treated her like royalty. She's always praised me to friends and family, calling me an exceptional husband. But now, I keep asking myself, why? Why risk it all for some fling? Why jeopardize the life we built, our family, for an affair with her boss? This is what cuts the deepest. Zoe has always been a devoted mother, and I thought, a loving wife. Our intimacy was regular and fulfilling, or at least that's what I believed. She managed the household on top of her full-time job as an executive assistant at a local tech company. An affair was the last thing I ever expected from her. Looking back now, I see the signs, but at the time, I never saw it coming. I've given Zoe the best life I could provide, and I never held back on showing her love, both in words and actions. She's always been the one who bragged to friends about what a good husband I am, claiming I was 1 in a million. But for her to throw that away for some cheap thrill, it's baffling. She knew what I stood for: loyalty, respect, and trust. Crossing that line with her boss, knowing full well who I am and what I'm capable of, is a level of betrayal I can't let go unanswered. The irony is that the same instincts that made me successful in business are what flagged her changes. It's like watching a competitor pull a move they think you won't see coming. But I saw the signs, the change in her wardrobe, the way she carried herself differently. The late texts and the so-called work meetings. She had explanations ready every single time, but my gut told me to dig deeper. And now that I've got the proof, there's no room for negotiation. I'll handle this on my terms, and she'll understand what it means to test the limits of someone who takes loyalty as seriously as I do. When she finds out what's coming, she'll realize that I'm not someone you betray and walk away from unscathed. Finally, Thursday night rolled around, and I was prepared for what was about to happen. It was all choreographed down to the very second, with one of my boys waiting in the wings to step in at the opportune time and deliver the evidence folder. I had arrived early at the restaurant, greased the hostess's palm, and asked for a secluded table for Zoe and her boss, Ryan. My clever wife was certain that I was out of town, much in the same way that she'd convinced herself her little fling would remain under wraps. A little earlier that week, I'd overheard her confirm with her boss, hinting that Thursday night she'd be available. Eager as ever, he took her up on it, even offering to arrange the plans. I'd seen the messages between them with the software the investigators installed on her phone. On Monday, Ryan sent a detailed text to Zoe, the time he would pick her up, a restaurant reservation, and a last request for her to dress provocatively. The words had been like gasoline on a flame, fueling my anger in particular because I knew he would be picking her right from our home. My plan was set. I'd let them get comfortable, settle in, and then I'd make my appearance. My heart raced with anger and, at the same time, anticipation. I knew Zoe wasn't looking to end our marriage. She loved our life and our daughters. That much I believed. But tonight, I would just make her understand the seriousness of her actions. Understanding, perhaps forgiveness, if nothing else for the kid's sake, some would say. That, however, wasn't my journey. Alpha pride, jealousy, various things one might call it, but there was simply no way in hell I'd allow some other guy to hit on my wife and just pretend it never happened. Finally, I got the signal they were sitting down, drinks available. It was time. I got out of my car, straightened myself up, and went into the restaurant purposely, greeting the hostess with a calm smile as I passed. A few tables away, I spotted them in deep conversation. Zoe was in a cocktail dress that gripped her curves, a bold choice showing off a side of her I had never seen. She was gorgeous, but it irritated me that she had dressed that way for someone else. For years, I had never seen her in anything like that, and here she was trying to impress someone other than me. Taking a deep breath to calm myself, I moved up to them from the side. Zoe was giggling, hunched forward toward Ryan, the both of them enjoying one of those personal, almost sweet moments. They didn't even notice me until I pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat down, facing them. Ryan looked irritated, but the look on Zoe's face was priceless. Guilt, shock, and fear. I smiled and broke the silence. "Hey, Zoe, looks like you're having a nice night. Mind if I join?" She was smooth, quick, and controlled in her response. "Oh, hey, what a surprise. I thought that you were out of town tonight. My boss Ryan invited me over for dinner to go over some organizational changes. Why don't you join us?" She sounded sweet, the lies slipping as smoothly as silk off her tongue. I'll give it to her. She was good. At that moment, the drink I'd ordered had arrived, and I raised my glass, light in my voice. "Why not start with a toast?" I said, belaying her story. "To a night full of new directions and unexpected revelations." I turned to Ryan, the smile still on my face. "So, Ryan, do you know what's kept Zoe and me happily married for 15 years? The basics. Honesty and trust." I paused, then asked, "You married, Ryan?" He looked taken aback, but composed himself quickly. "Yes, actually. I've been married for 20 years. Got 4 great kids, ages 5 to 13. Trust and honesty, you're absolutely right. Those are key to a good marriage." "Good to know," I said, nodding. Then, turning to Zoe, I added, "Wouldn't you agree, Zoe, that trust and honesty are the cornerstones of any strong marriage?" She didn't even stutter as she replied, "Of course, darling. That is what keeps us close. Honesty, trust." She smiled right back at me, and her voice didn't falter a single step. It was the cool deliberation with which she lied to my face that nailed it. I drank again, the anger rising inside of me, mixed with a weird calm. She was Zoe of few missteps, always polished, at least when she presented herself. Tonight, though, she hadn't had a single inkling of what was coming. I knew that I would never look at her quite the same way again. Tonight had little to do with catching her in a lie, and was everything to do with making sure she felt the weight of every choice she'd made, leading into this very moment. I set my drink down with a casual motion, Placing the folder on the table, my eyes locked on Zoe's. "Ryan," I started off, still pleasant. "There's something you ought to know. Zoe and I have never made it a secret how we take care of our betrayals. I'd say tonight is as good a night as any to remind her just what that means." Thursday night reached its peak, and with everything carefully orchestrated, I felt prepared to bring the curtain down on this twisted show. I couldn't help but think of just how convinced they were that no one was wiser as I watched the two of them coss it over drinks. After all, to them, this was only a business dinner. There wasn't any reason for Zoe to feel even a little anxious, let alone any reason for her to feel guilty. "You see, Ryan," I started off, having taken another sip from my glass, "our marriage is solid. Zoe knows just how much I'd go through for her, so long as she stays faithful." They both shifted uncomfortably. I held my grin, keeping the facade alive. Then, casual as hell, I dropped, "So, how long have you two been seeing each other?" Zoe's irritation was instantaneous. Her tone snapped back with a defensive edge. "Honey, this is a business meeting, and you're making my boss uncomfortable. Please don't let jealousy cloud things. You know me better." Ryan took this as his cue to intervene. "Oscar, let's clear this up. This is strictly business," he said with a stern expression. "I have professional boundaries, especially toward a married woman." Feigning contrition, I said, "So let me get this straight. You're saying this is strictly professional, nothing personal at all?" "That's correct," Ryan assured. "Absolutely nothing going on here." I turned to Zoe and leaned in closer. "Zoe, is that true? No history, nothing going on between you two?" The question hung in the air, the answer to it a final line between truth and deceit, but I already knew what was coming. "Of course, darling," she replied smoothly. "It is all work. I'd never be involved with anybody else, let alone my boss. Please do not be immature." Continuing, she said, "Ryan, I am so sorry about my husband's jealousy. He knows how much I love him." Lowering her head, she played the submissive role. "Well, you know me," I continued in a softer tone. "Just a little jealous, I guess." Smiling wryly, I added, "Seeing you in that dress, sitting here with a handsome guy, you understand my reaction, right?" Relieved, Ryan chuckled and gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Hey, no worries. If my wife looked this amazing out with a stranger, I'd probably feel the same." As tensions were somewhat eased, I nodded at my contact across the bar, who approached with an inch-thick folder and handed it over quietly before moving off. I observed both Zoe and Ryan watching curiously, their faces going from mild interest to alarm as I laid out the contents on the table. I took a deep breath, leaned toward Zoe, and spoke in a very low and serious tone. "Zoe, I loved you deeply. I was ready to give you the world, but you've thrown that away, together with our marriage, without even a second thought. I will live with the memories of those videos and recordings all my life. Thank you for that." With that, I laid the first photo on the table. It was an 8x10 shot of Zoe, on her knees, intimately involved with Ryan. The second photo showed them in an even more compromising position, and the next revealed various angles, each exposing another painful betrayal. Zoe's hand flew to her mouth in shock, her eyes wide, while Ryan's face turned red with anger as he demanded to know how I'd obtained them. All I did was say he should sit quiet now. As I laid out the last of the pictures, I went slow, making sure to give a measured calm to every scan. I threw in small remarks like, "Zoe, you look particularly dedicated in that one." And, "Ryan, you appear quite pleased here. You act like you're enjoying my wife." Zoe was tearfully begging me to stop. The tables surrounding us began to stare at us, so I kept my voice low, refusing to make more of a scene than was needed. But in her eyes, I saw devastation as she finally grasped just how deeply she had cut. She leaned in closer to me, her face wet with tears. "Please, baby, let's go home and talk. This isn't what it looks like," she begged in despair. I looked at her with a faint smile and said, "Not what it looks like. You really are going to lie to my face again? Both of you should know, I've got hours of video, audio recordings, text messages, emails, and pictures. Everything's documented." Taking a moment, I proceeded, "Zoe, I never imagined you had this side to you. I didn't know this part of you existed, and I'll never forget that. I've spent months and a small fortune gathering this information. Trust me, I understand exactly what went on." I calmly returned the folder to its envelope and pulled out the divorce papers. "Now, here's how this goes tonight," I told her before handing her the documents. "Zoe, our marriage is done. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. You'll sign these papers tonight. The gentleman at the bar is a notary who will witness your signature." Her face went pale as I pressed on, my voice unyielding. "If you refuse, I will make sure everyone knows the whole truth. Your parents included, our friends, and if need be, our daughters. I have been decent in this divorce, but our daughters belong to me. I will make sure that they are not raised by someone as manipulative as you. And as for you, Ryan," I turned to him with a glance, "I'd advise you to get her to sign quickly. Otherwise, every shred of evidence I have goes directly to your wife and your company's board. By the time I'm done, you can count yourself lucky to have a job or a marriage." I paused, my eyes locked on both of theirs. "You're welcome to each other after this," I finished coldly, "but I want nothing to do with either of you again." My words struck like a hammer, and as I watched Zoe's face crumble, I knew she felt the weight of what she was risking. Losing her daughters was a blow she could barely stand, and her boyfriend Ryan was panicking. Zoe's pleas poured out, the usual desperation. "It's not what it looks like. Please let me explain. I'll make it right. It was just a mistake, Oscar. Forgive me." She ended with a weak, "I love you. Please, just one more chance." Without even acknowledging her pleas, I got up. "I'm heading to the restroom. When I come back, those papers better be signed. If they aren't, I guarantee you'll regret every choice that brought you here tonight." Leaving her in tears and Ryan in shock, I turned and walked away, feeling her eyes on me. I knew exactly what would happen while I was gone. Ryan would scramble to save himself. He understood he was in deep, and he'd do anything to make sure those videos and photos didn't reach his wife or workplace. As expected, he moved quickly, leaning close to Zoe. "Listen, sign the papers. Ask him to hold them for just a week. Tell him that it's the least he can do after 15 years together. Promise therapy, whatever he wants. Convince him to give you 1 week to talk, to remind him why he fell in love with you. I can tell he's not bluffing. And if those videos get out, we're both finished. We can't afford that." "Please," Zoe whimpered, still crying. "Think about our kids. I can't lose them." She clutched at his words, and after a few moments, I returned to the table. "So, have you signed?" I asked, my gaze hard. Zoe looked up, eyes full of despair. "Honey, I'll sign them. I'll do anything you want. But could you please give me 1 week? Let me come back home with you. After 15 years, just 1 week with our daughters to talk, to try. Can you grant me that?" I stared at her, letting her feel the weight of my silence. Finally, I said, "Even though you deserve my anger, I'll give you that. You can come back home, but you'll stay in one of the guest rooms. I don't want you near my bed. 1 week, and then I'll hand these over to my lawyer." I pushed the papers closer. "Sign." She took the pen with shaking hands, put her name down, and I placed the documents in the folder, standing up, ready to leave. I reached for her hand, and for a brief second she smiled, thinking maybe I was softening. But then I slipped her wedding rings off and pocketed them. Reaching down, I pulled off my own ring, held it up for her to see, and then casually dropped it into her glass of wine. Her face showed a flicker of realization as the betrayal settled in. Perhaps now she was feeling a sliver of my pain. Turning to Ryan, I added, "Congratulations, she's all yours now. Do what you want with her. But remember this, Ryan, you messed with my wife and broke my family apart. You've risked everything, including my kids' view of their mother. Right now, your future is in my hands, and I won't forget that. You should be grateful I'm not going through with my first plan for you. But make no mistake, this isn't the last you'll hear from me." Ryan's face went pale as I leaned in, towering over him, watching him shrink under my stare. He nodded, unable to meet my gaze. Then I turned on my heel and left without looking back, feeling the cold satisfaction of leaving them both to face the consequences they'd brought upon themselves. As I made my way to the door, a part of me wondered if I'd just put a complete halt to their evening plans. I couldn't help but imagine whether they were still in the mood for their little escapade now that I'd pulled back the curtain on their secret. But as I turned to leave, I felt Zoe's hand grip my arm. Her eyes were desperate. "Oscar, please, can I come back home with you? I just want to be with you. Please." I pulled my arm away as if I'd been burned, my voice dripping with contempt. "Get off me. You're his for the night, his little toy. I'll see you once he's done with you. Whether it's tonight or tomorrow makes no difference to me. You have 1 week, Zoe. You disgust me, and I can't believe I ever thought of you as my wife." Yes, I was being harsh, and maybe I was over the line, But I didn't care. I was proud I'd managed to control my rage and keep myself composed through all of it. Giving her a week to sort things out was generous enough, and we'd see where that took us. Later that night, I heard her come home. True to her word, she went straight to the guest room, understanding I wasn't in the mood for any calm discussion. The next morning, we crossed paths in the kitchen as I went for my coffee, the air thick with tension. Still fueled by a simmering anger, I couldn't resist starting off with, "Good morning. How's my unfaithful partner feeling today?" She flinched, her gaze dropping to her coffee, and then, like every remorseful spouse grasping for redemption, she said, "Honey, we need to talk." "There's no need for that, Zoe," I replied coldly. "I know everything. I know how long it's been going on, what you told him about me and our marriage. I saw things you did for him that you never did for me. I saw the way you dressed for him. Heard every word you said in those videos. You hid, lied, cheated, made a complete fool of me. If there's anything left unsaid, now's the time. Otherwise, I don't want to hear it." "The fool is me, not you," she managed, her voice trembling. "I don't know why I let it happen. You've given me everything I ever wanted, and no matter what you saw, I love you. Hurting you was never my intent. I never wanted you to find out." "That's the issue, Zoe. You never wanted me to find out. You intended to keep lying, sneaking around with him, hiding everything. It wasn't just infidelity. It was the deception, the deliberate betrayal. I might have forgiven a mistake. We're all human, and we all make mistakes. But this wasn't a slip. It was a choice you made again and again, with the intention of keeping it a secret. I do love you, Zoe, but like that song goes, what's love got to do with it? You've destroyed my trust, and now I'm questioning if I ever truly knew you. How many other men were there? How many times did you come back to me after being with him? I can barely look at you without feeling sick." Her face crumbled as she realized the depth of my pain. Sobbing openly now, she seemed to understand, for the first time, the enormity of what she'd done. Her words were barely above a whisper, full of regret. "I have no excuse. There was no one else, just him. And I can't believe I let it get to this point. But I don't want us to divorce. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I think I need therapy, and maybe we could go together. Please, Oscar, don't leave me." I paused, letting her words hang in the air, choosing my response carefully. "Zoe, go to counseling, work on yourself, and I'll support you. But I can't be with a woman who could throw me away so easily. Your actions told me exactly how you feel, and I don't want to live my life with someone who holds those feelings toward me. I know there are other women out there who'd appreciate being with me. You had your chance, and you let it slip away." Her face fell as she realized the finality in my voice. "Take this week to spend time with the girls. Find a way to explain why you're leaving. I won't speak ill of you to them, but they deserve honesty. You need to be the one to tell them why things will be different. In the divorce agreement, I've ensured you'll have unrestricted access to the girls whenever you want, though they'll primarily live with me. If your behavior ever becomes reckless or a bad influence, I won't hesitate to make your visits more challenging. Do you understand? I'm willing to be fair, even if you may not fully deserve it, and I'll support your relationship with them. But I have 2 questions, and I need honest answers. First, why would you risk everything we built for this? And second, was it worth it?" The following Monday, I reached out to Ryan and set up a lunch meeting for Wednesday. Once he'd convinced me he was willing to meet, I didn't hold back. I laid into him, expressing my frustration over how his actions destroyed my marriage and how dangerously close he came to facing severe consequences. Then I unfolded my alternative plan for him, something to ensure he'd feel the weight of his choices. During lunch, I made it clear how his reckless involvement with a married woman had impacted countless lives, not just mine. I explained what I expected from him as a way to make things right. That included covering Zoe's rent and car payments for the next 3 years. "You're going to feel some discomfort over this," I told him. "I'll send you the details for the payments and you'll set up automatic transfers. This is your punishment, Ryan. Believe me, you're getting off lightly. Despite what Zoe did, I still want her to be looked after. And since you're responsible for this fallout, you'll cover her costs." I leaned in, locking eyes with him. "If you don't, I'll make sure you lose your job, and your wife Jenna finds out every detail. Consider it a favor that you get to walk away from this alive, and with some semblance of your life intact. People like you need to learn there are consequences for going after married women. Families get broken, and people suffer. Next time, pursue single women. Your actions were disgraceful, Ryan. I kept things civil with Zoe, allowing her to see the kids and maintain a bond with them, but my respect and trust in her were shattered beyond repair. Ryan kept up with the monthly payments, his mind on the unspoken consequences if he missed one. As time went on, Zoe struggled to find any satisfactory explanation for her actions. She admitted that her affair and the dishonesty hadn't been worth the damage, that she regretted every decision. Yet, when it came down to it, she couldn't articulate why she'd done it. Now, she lives alone without the boyfriend she once risked everything for, and without the love and family we once shared. I could have destroyed her reputation completely, but watching her lose her family and my love seemed punishment enough. She attended counseling, seeking answers, but the question of why remained. The closest she came to an answer was, I honestly don't know. It just happened. It wasn't about you or our life together. I loved you, and I was happy with you, with everything we had. It was just something new, something thrilling. I made a huge mistake, and I couldn't stop. I sighed, not convinced. Zoe, if you were truly happy, why would you dress in those outfits for him? Go out of your way to impress him in ways you never did with me? If you'd put half that energy into us, maybe we'd still be together. It just happened doesn't cut it. This wasn't a one-time mistake. You planned it, dressed to please him every single time. You claimed to love me, but I hope someday you can give me a real answer.